My Atari nerdiness knows no bounds. Not even the Atlantic Ocean could stop me from this European Atari retro handheld console, and I'm going to review it for you right now.
Don't you know that you're a grown-up? No games, no puns. Not allowed if you're a grown-up.
Hey there, welcome back to GenXGrownUp. I'm John. I am a GenXGrownUp. Thank you for checking out this video and the channel. Growing up in the 70s and the 80s as a Generation Xer, the video games that I learned to play games on was my Atari console. I'm a pushover for just about any kind of Atari nostalgia, or especially classic Atari emulation. You might remember last year I took a look at this flashback handheld portable. If you saw that or want to refresh your memory, I'll put a link to it up in the corner and you can click and take a look. Some of the things I really liked about this one was the fact that it was rechargeable and it had an SD slot so you could add more ROMs to expand beyond what it shipped with. And because this is my kind of frame of reference for what Atari handheld console can be, I'll be relying on that pretty heavily in comparison when I talk about this that I just picked up. I found this cool Atari retro console maybe a year ago, but it was pretty expensive, and plus there's the import fees and the shipping. It was crazy. It's just come down in price. In fact, I picked it up on Amazon.uk. And later, if you decide that you're interested, I will put a link to that Amazon store right down in the description of this video so you can check it out. So what made me decide to pick this up? Well, it says Atari on it, for one, but plus, look at that sweet wood grain, and the face of it is really kind of simulating what the Atari console looked like. It's a lot of kind of what's inspiring that new, weird, crazy Atari VCS, Indiegogo thing that may or may not ever show up at my doorstep. But for now, we're gonna take a look at this. 50 games powered by Blaze, which is a pretty well-known kind of emulation handheld platform. Before we get started though, if this is your first time checking out GenXGrownUp, see that little bar that lifts up there? Give that subscribe button a click and enable notifications with that little bell, and you'll be able to check out much more of our Gen X inspired content. All right, let's dig into this unit and see what it's like. There it is in all its glory. Straight from the UK. Retro handheld console, 50 classic Atari games built in. That is nothing in and of itself to write home about, but I'm hoping the design wows me like I expect it to. So let's bust in and see. All right, we got a little slidey drawer here. Oh, look at that. Where was I? Oh, right, okay, all right. All right, let's see what else comes inside and then we'll dig back in. Looks like we've got a little advertisement here encouraging us to buy some more Atari junk. Yeah, I'm the target audience for that. And little instructions here. What's the instructions tell us? Eh, we don't need instructions, screw that. Back to the star of the show. This is always satisfying. Now we knew going in it's faux wood grain. It's not actual wood grain, it's this plastic, but a quick tour of the unit then. Across the top we have a power on off, headphone jack, AV out, and a volume little wheel there. On the front we have our select button and our start button. A four-way D-pad. Looks very much like an old Atari controller. Gotta love that. On the side here we have an A and a B button, oddly enough. I don't know why A and a B, but two buttons here. Underneath the buttons is this rubbery, kind of feels very much like that boot that was on top of the Atari joystick, which is pretty awesome. Nothing to see on either side. And then on the back, we have the battery compartment that houses 4 AAA. So let's throw them in and give it a test drive. There he is. That is very reminiscent of the flashback, actually. Looks like, yeah, 10 pages of 5 games each. So there's the 50 games that they advertise. What this doesn't have, you might have noticed, is any kind of expandability. There's no SD slot, so I can't add more games or ROMs. So you pretty much get the 50 games that you get. Let's take a quick peek at what these kind of play like. Asteroids is a great candidate. So there's the start. Yeah. Oh, you know what I've noticed right away? The sound of this. Coming from Europe, this is the PAL. This is the PAL ROMs. Yeah, everything is just a little slowed down for PAL, which I mean, can't hold against it. I bought this from Europe. That's normal, but yeah, you can hear from the sound. Okay, let's pause right here for a quick, very simplified analog TV lesson. Back in the days of analog television, the United States used what was called NTSC, and Europe used something called PAL. The main difference between those standards had to do with refresh rates, but the bottom line of how it affected Atari was that the PAL format had more scan line. NTSC had like 525 and PAL had 625. Well, the Atari VCS was really just pushing the boundaries of what it could possibly do, and in fact the way it drew the screen was how it handled its timing. So any ROM that came from Europe that's a PAL ROM for the Atari is naturally going to run slower than it would on its NTSC counterpart. And that's because it literally had to draw an extra 100 scan lines every frame that was created. That took time, that time was interrupting the speed with which the game could run, and that impacts not only the speed with which the game can be played, but also the rate at which audio can be refreshed, and that tends to change the pitch and timing of a lot of the sounds, not only the bleeps and bloops, but music, anything you're accustomed to hearing in an NTSC Atari game. Let's try another one. So start and select, move you out. Let's see, looks like they're alphabetical. How about Missile Command? I think that was in there. Yeah, Missile Command. Yeah, you can hear the pitch is just a little bit lower. Is it nothing wrong with that? It's just the way it was in Europe, and I got this from Europe, so that's the way it is, but it sounds weird to my ear. Doesn't make it wrong, just makes it weird to me. The little directional thumb pad is not terrible. I mean, I prefer a D-pad, but this is essentially just a rounded D-pad, if you can just get used to where the corners are. We have to try Yar's Revenge, because it's on there. Ah, it should be Yar's S apostrophe. You should be able to really hear the pitch sound of the PAL ROM here. Ugh. Beyond the PAL ROM, it almost kind of sounds like it can't... This little thing can't quite keep up with the emulation of an Atari, for heaven's sake. Oh, just missed the coat tile. Come on, we can get him. Not like that. Boom! And finally, let's try something that uses paddles. Maybe Breakout. Let's give Breakout a shot. Let's see how this stick does simulating the paddle controller. Which it does have some acceleration in it, which I'm noticing, even though it's an analog. All right, we'll try it. It's not terrible. Yeah. And let's try Night Driver. I think that's on there. That's one that I always had. Night Driver. Yeah, dual driving on Night Driver. There we go. Ow. Ow. Yeah, you really can't. You can't do Night Driver with the joystick. You need the wheel for the steering. Yeah. Notable that they have 3 of the Sword Quest titles on here. That's pretty cool. Earthworld, Fireworld, and Waterworld are all present if you want to go back and try to win some prizes that are no longer being given away. And we would be remiss if we did not give Adventure a shot here. There's our gold key. Just it feels so slow. I know I said I wouldn't complain about that anymore. I'm done. We need to finish this adventure at least. Let's go get the key and get the chalice. The controls are just a little tough to get used to. Just, I mean, a tiny bit. A regular D-pad would have been welcome, but serviceable, that's for sure. All right, let's take our chalice back to the gold castle, and we will call this look at this cute little handheld done. It's time to sum it up. What do I really think about this little guy, and is it worth your money? First of all, gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. If they were trying to trigger like those nostalgic feelings in me for what the Atari console felt and looked like, they nailed it, hit it right on the head. The build quality is like really stable. There's no give in it, no bow or anything. And just to hold it, to put it in your hand is fantastic. The gameplay is okay. Now I'm going to disregard the fact that these are PAL ROMs. That's just a matter of like familiarity with me. This came from Europe. It's only fair these should be PAL ROMs, so I'm not going to factor that into my review at all. But even considering that those are PAL ROMs, some of the sounds, it felt like it was struggling to create the sounds. That's unacceptable for Atari emulation. Are you kidding me? You can play that on the oldest phone you have and it's flawless. So I don't know why that's in there. Maybe it has to do with the wrapper that's around it. That kind of bugged me a little bit. The other big ding against this unit is that it only has 50 ROMs in it and there's zero expandability, no SD card or anything. Listen, Atari ROMs are like 4K. Storage is nothing. There should be hundreds of ROMs on here. And if that's a licensing issue, give me an SD slot. I mean, remember this guy? This is fantastic. It was about the same, I think it was cheaper actually what I paid for this. And I had SD card and now I have hundreds of Atari games on here. Not as sexy, not as pretty to look at. This thing is gorgeous, but this one has it head and shoulders above the other one in terms of what you can do with it and how many of your old games you can enjoy. You know, taking all those things into consideration, this little European Atari handheld console reminds me of that cheerleader that I had a crush on in high school. She looks smoking hot, but once you get to know it a little bit, it doesn't have much else to offer. If I was going to rate this in terms of how it feels in my hand and kind of how it looks and how it reminds me of an Atari, 5 tokens out of 5. But this is not a looks contest. This is how good this can simulate the games that you enjoyed growing up as a kid. So when you take all of those factors into account, I'm going to have to give this Atari retro handheld console from Europe 2 tokens out of 5. Don't take it too hard though, little Atari console. You still look beautiful. I'm going to take out your batteries and you'll live on my shelf. GenXGrownUp is dedicated to bringing you new Generation X inspired videos every week. Here are a couple more you can watch right now, but for even more, subscribe and enable those notifications. And if you love what we do, we invite you to support us over on Patreon. And of course, your feedback in the comments and a quick thumbs up are always appreciated.